Today on CNN Student News, the last space shuttle launch in 2011 was a blast from the past. We'll tell you where NASA's looking for the future of space exploration. First up, though, we're taking you to California, where firefighters are racing to contain wildfires that are scorching parts of the state. About 60 miles east of Sacramento, in El Dorado National Forest, one fire had chewed up about 8,600 acres by yesterday afternoon. That's like 8,600 football fields. And it was only 5% contained when we produced this show. Thousands of people have had to evacuate their homes, and this is only one of almost a dozen different fires that are fueled by the state's historic drought. California sees a lot of wildfires. It has a wildfire season that runs from May to October. But CAL FIRE says this one is on track to be the most destructive season ever. A heat wave that settled over California this week isn't helping. Jumping cross-country to Atlanta, Georgia, it's the headquarters of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and it's where President Obama spoke yesterday about Ebola. Several nations in West Africa are losing their fight against it. There are more people with suspected Ebola than there are hospital beds to treat them. The U.S. has committed $100 million to efforts to help stop the fever from spreading. But yesterday, the president asked Congress to approve an additional $88 million. It would be used to build treatment centers in West Africa and send more American medical workers to affected regions. Obama administration officials say as many as 3,000 additional U.S. troops could be sent to West Africa as well. The UN says Ebola could become a major humanitarian crisis. NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, is calling taxi. Its space shuttle program might have ended 3 years ago, but it's using some of the taxpayer funding it gets to pay private companies to invent space taxis, vehicles that could potentially get Americans to the International Space Station, maybe beyond. They launched from Florida's Kennedy Space Station starting in 2017. So who will be making them?
A major milestone has been met in the new private space race. Boeing was awarded the majority of NASA's commercial crew contract to replace the space shuttle.
And liftoff, the final liftoff of Atlantis.
Boeing's CST-100 will ferry American astronauts back and forth to the International Space Station. This is a big deal. Since NASA canceled the shuttle program in 2011, we've had to rely on Russia to get our astronauts into space. Seats on the Russian Soyuz capsule cost over $70 million each. Now, I've actually been inside the CST-100, and while it's designed for safety, it's actually pretty cramped in there. It can fit up to 7, but it's configured to only fit 5 right now. Boeing beat out 2 other private companies to win this contract, Sierra Nevada and Elon Musk's SpaceX, which won a smaller contract to develop an alternative to Boeing's capsule, the Dragon. NASA turned to the private sector to reduce cost and risk in both the long and the short term. That set off a new private space race, and the announcement marks a big win for Boeing. Boeing officials told me they believe this industry could be worth $20 billion over the next 20 years.
See if you can ID me. I'm a term for both a currency and a unit of weight. Currently, I'm worth just over $1.60. I'm made up of 100 pence and I'm used in the United Kingdom. I'm the pound, or officially the pound sterling, and I'm the world's oldest currency that's still being used today.
But will Scotland, currently part of the UK, still use the pound if it separates from the UK? That's one question ahead of this Thursday's vote, but the biggest one will be on the ballot. Should Scotland be an independent country? Polls show Scottish voters are split on the issue. UK government leaders are asking Scots to stay part of Britain and promising them more power in the government if they do. Independence movement leaders say it's time to break away from Britain and give Scots total control over their country's taxes and spending. But getting back to the currency question.
What's the cost of independence? The United Kingdom has been united for 307 years, but on September 18th, the Scots will vote on whether to break free and form their own country. Now, if they do end up getting a divorce, it could be expensive. No one knows exactly how this is going to play out, but it's expected that both the economies of the UK and a newly formed Scotland would take a short-term hit. Here are some factors that you should know about. Number 1, administrative costs. Scotland will need a new defence department, a foreign affairs department, economic regulators, and a new tax system, among other things. Now, one estimate from academics pegs the cost to up to £200 million. That's about £40 per Scot. But another estimate puts the price tag more than 10 times higher at £2.4 billion. That's almost $4 billion. That's only the tip of the iceberg. The big question is whether or not a new Scotland would use the UK pound. Independence campaigners say yes. The UK, however, says no. Does that mean that Scotland would use the currency without permission? It's creating serious uncertainty for businesses and trade. Another option would be to use the euro, but that would take time. Or will they create their own currency? And that brings us to our third point, which is debt. The debate is raging over Scotland paying its share of UK debt, likely upwards of £100 billion. But on top of that, will investors lend to a new Scotland? Those are just some of the costs and risks of independence. Now, pro-independence campaigners argue that a break will give Scottish lawmakers more power to create long-term prosperity for the nation and support local industry. And of course, independence is never only about economics. But change is hard, and markets certainly don't like change, so the short term might be costly. For CNN Money, I'm Zain Asher.
We're traveling all over North America for today's Call of the Roll. Atikamekw, Alberta, Canada is where we're starting. Glad to be part of your day at Atikamekw School. Next, we'll run with the Mustangs of Summers Middle School. Found them in Summers, Montana. And in Charlottesville, Virginia, how about the Mustangs of Monticello High School, turning up the horsepower on today's roll. It's neat to think that if your little brother's missing a Lego block, or you need a new case for your phone, or you can't find a certain size measuring cup, you could just print it up right there in your house. 3D printers aren't new, but they are getting more affordable.
Traditionally, when you think of printing, you think of printing out something on a piece of paper using ink. Well, 3D printing is actually printing out a physical object. You have a digital image that you can create using different animation modeling softwares. You connect this image with your 3D printer, and it actually takes that, analyzes it, and it prints it out in physical form, layer by layer. If you think about traditional printing, you have syringes with ink. With 3D printing, you can have syringes filled with all different types of liquid consistencies. So this could be plastic, this could be rubber. Some more advanced ones are using metals. Manufacturers have been using 3D printing for decades, and you can print out car parts. Aerospace industry uses this, but also more and more you can print out really creative things. Doctors are printing out prosthetic limbs. You can now print out organs. We spoke to a fashion designer who was able to actually 3D print sunglasses that he put on his models for fashion weeks. It used to be that the average person couldn't own one because 3D printers were really, really expensive. We're talking like $500,000. But now a couple different companies came and they said, you know what, we want to make this so average people could have this. You can probably get one for about $1,000. So let's say I had a jacket and I lost my button. Instead of going and trying to go to a store and find a new button, I could actually download the blueprint, connect it with my 3D printer, and I could print out a new button. The people at the forefront of this movement, they say they want this to be as common in people's homes as the toaster oven. So you can only imagine that 5-10 years down the road, a lot of folks are going to have 3D printers in their homes.
So last week we covered a contractor who is planning to 3D print houses. What about a car? Done and done. Sorta. The engine, lights, and windshield had to be made the old-fashioned way. But the carbon fiber body was printed up in less than 2 days. We're not sure if it's street legal. Its top speed is only 40 miles per hour, and it's electric, so its range is limited to 120 miles on a charge. The cost, between $18,000 and $30,000. So it's kind of like a wheelie, pricey golf cart. But if the idea drives further innovation, the technology accelerates while the price throttles down, things could speed up for 3D printed vehicles, signaling a new era in automobiling. At least it's a noble transmission statement. I'm Carl Azuz, and I'm hitting the road.